reporter for cable station WSPD here at St. Peter's Lutheran Church in Schaumburg. Today is a very special segment on L.E.R.T. L.E.R.T stands for Lutheran Early Response Team. I'm going to go inside and take this course, and I'm going to find out how these teams will help communities in disaster. Come on in and join me. I'm inside all nice and warm now, and here are our speakers today for the Lutheran Early Response Training for the teams. This is Roger and Ed, and can you tell me what I can kind of expect a little bit of today?
We're going to help people understand how they can respond to disasters in the community and in other places, and help people, care about people, but we're also going to prepare them to be trained additionally in chainsaw and mucking out basements and food and preparation, all the things that people need after a disaster.
Well, this would be great for the community in Schaumburg to know about. And later this week, I'm going to interview Tim Hetzner, President of Lutheran Church Charities as well. And this is your assistant, Ed, here.
Ed, tell them about you.
I'm with the Lutheran Church Charities. I do the chainsaw training specifically, so I'm more of a field person that goes out there and actually does it, but there'll be some questions on what we actually do out there.
Well, that's good to have training in chainsaws, that's for sure.
Yes, that's absolutely.
How long will the training be today?
We should, if we begin at 9 o'clock, we should be done around noon.
You got quite an attendance here in line. How many people have registered for this training?
We believe there's well over 60.
Wow, it's going to be a good attendance. Well, I'm looking forward to this, and let's go inside.
And I'm happy you're watching Schaumburg's Park District Cable Access TV, WSPD.
Here I am at Lutheran Church Charities in Addison, Illinois with President Tim Hetzner. As I mentioned, I was going to meet with you and discuss a little bit more in depth the Lutheran Early Response Team training. And at the very end, I got this wonderful certificate and the vest.
Okay.
And my name
your
tag.
ID card.
So I'm official.
You're official.
Official.
Good.
So let's talk about the history of L.E.R.T. How long has it been?
Well, L.E.R.T actually was developed after Katrina. When Katrina hit, and I can't remember the year, but it was probably about 10 years ago. Because of the size of that disaster and the number of people that came in and the magnitude of it, volunteers came out and worked. Now, we were doing disaster response work prior to that, but what came out of Katrina was that many volunteers came in that shouldn't have come in. A, they didn't know how to conduct themselves in a disaster area, and second, sad to say, there were many people that came in and they looted things. And so it was an effort of FEMA to say that all first responders needed to be certified in order to get into the front end of a disaster area.
And L.E.R.T, we're not first responders.
Yes, we are. Actually, when there is a disaster, because let me just finish out the process.
Oh, okay.
FEMA developed a training for first responders. Now that, of course, it consisted of, firemen, policemen, and all that kind of stuff, which most of them already had the training. The problem wasn't with them. The problem was with volunteers, so they developed a training. Now, that training, the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, because we do disaster respond and respond to disasters, the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod met with the disaster response people nationally, took what needed to be trained in what they train, and developed around that the training and added things to it to be more specific to what Lutheran Church Missouri Synod and Lutheran Church Charities do in disaster response. We work differently than a normal volunteer coming in that may work through Red Cross or someplace else. Because we are church-based, in disasters, we work through one of our local churches. And that's where we set up base, and we deploy people out and have the whole structure. FEMA's fine with that. In fact, it's less work for them, and they knew that, and our training was approved by them. So all that stuff was there. So in a disaster, we are generally have boots on the ground within 24 hours. Just recently, for example, Washington, Illinois, where some people may remember, that disaster hit on December 7th, November 17th. November 17th, which was a Sunday, hit at 11 a.m. I was on the ground at 5:30 that Sunday afternoon, assessing the situation, meeting with the pastor of the church, Tom Herron, at Our Savior's Lutheran Church, right in Washington, which was right there where the disaster hit. In fact, the church and the parsonage were also damaged. And that next Monday morning, the following day, we had boots in the ground on the church facility. The disaster area wasn't opened up yet for volunteers to come in because power lines and so forth were down, but we had volunteers in on the church area. So we are first responders in the aspect of we go in right away to where our church base is. We set up, we do work at that church if it's been damaged, parsonage if it's been damaged, and we then can start working on members' homes, provided that the home site is safe and there are no power lines down, that sort of thing. So we come in right away. What brings us in, because they screen people coming in, is our L.E.R.T credentials. Because we are L.E.R.T trained, which is recognized by FEMA, we're able to go in, base ourselves at the church so we're not creating work for anybody else, and then operate out of that.
When I got the credentials and all of this, what's the next step? I get a schedule or an email?
Well, tell me when the next disaster is going to hit. Okay, so it depends. It depends on when a disaster hits, which you never know. Depends on where the disaster hits and what kind of disaster it is. When you're L.E.R.T trained, when a disaster hits, our LCC staff go on the ground immediately, as soon as we can get there. We assess the situation, make sure we have a base of operation to bring volunteers in, and then do an assessment. Is there work to be done right away? If so, where? And is it safe for our volunteers to come in and do that work? We won't bring anybody in to go out and deploy out to work if it's not safe. And we work with the local officials and those on the ground to determine that. Then you come in, you get the email, you respond and when you can come. Then we schedule you with a team or the L.E.R.T team that you trained with to come down. And then in your training it tells you what you all do. You're put on, first you get it that, you get an email that says be ready to. Or are you ready to? Can you do? And sometimes people can't because of their work schedules, whatever. But if you can, then we start figuring out where to deploy people, and then we coordinate all of our own volunteers going into disaster.
I was very impressed with how thorough this manual is. How to muck a basement, how chainsaw ministry. So there's advanced training above and beyond this. Can you tell me what that's about?
What you went through was the basic training to understand a disaster so that when you come into the area, you recognize that certain areas are not going to be safe. You already understand why you can't go in certain areas. You understand how LCC works and how we serve in a disaster area, because we are faith-based. We proclaim Christ in what we do. And that's not a secret. We serve all people, but we serve, through our church. That's our base of operation. The additional training is, which you're expected to continue on and receive, would be for specialized areas such as mucking a basement, chainsaws, which many times are required in disaster, but there's a mold, to understand about mold. And most times, Tony, you're on a team. And so not everybody on the team necessarily has to have mold training. But one person, at least on the team, needs to have that. So when you're in a flooding situation, for example, and you go down and you see mold, there's different kinds of mold, which I didn't know.
Really?
8 years ago, I thought there was mold, and there's not. But there are different kinds of mold depending on the situations and the severity of the mold, and how you clean that up determines the type of mold. And so in a mold situation in the basement, you have to wear the masks and gloves, and many times also a full suit that gets thrown away into the area. So it's those specialized areas so that somebody on your team knows the safety factors involved in doing a disaster, so that we're not causing another disaster in the disaster.
Well, during the training, Ed was there, who's in charge of the
Chainsaws.
And he asked the question, he goes, who here doesn't like to, or doesn't think she or he can handle a chainsaw? And of course my hand went up, and he goes, wrong. He said, if you can talk to people, if everybody's out there with the trees, who's going to talk to the people?
That's right.
So then that made sense to me. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's the unique part of L.E.R.T training and what Lutheran Church Charities does. I mean, you can come in, clean up, and move. But there are people involved. And when there's destruction that takes place with a person's home, and like in Washington and many other places, their stuff is thrown out all over the place. That's their life. And so we train also of how to share mercy and compassion with somebody, how to be patient with people who have gone through a crisis, so that you're not coming in there and all of a sudden clean up their stuff. We never throw away anything in a disaster without permission of the homeowner. And we're trained on how to help the homeowner gather what items they can. We have found some of the things that are most important for them are jewelry and pictures.
Oh, yes.
And even if a picture has been flooded or wet, it can be restored, and so that you at least have something. And so we know how to do that, and we help the person gather those things and put them in plastic bags so that they can be frozen and then later unthawed and restored. So it's working with the person and serving that person as Christ would.
Going forward in the future, do you see any changes within the program as it is now?
Always. I don't think anyone in anything, whatever the profession is or volunteer work, gets to a point where they know it all. In fact, if they do, they should probably quit what they're doing. Because we always learn new things. We always learn new ways in helping people to be more effective in what we do. And we also learn ways to serve people and be empathetic towards people and what they're going through. And those skills always need to be practiced and used and reminded. I come from a German heritage, and so many times my heritage is get in there and get the job done. And we could all go in there and get the job done and be on to the next house. But it's not about what we're collecting. It's not about getting the job done. It's about the person or the people that live and are experiencing and are going through that disaster. It's about them. And that's, I think, the other thing about L.E.R.T. And it's interesting, the federal government has realized that too with the faith-based groups, is with Lutheran Church Charities, when we go into a disaster, we don't go in and then pull out. We go in and stay in and continue to work while there's still work to be done. We today are still sending crews down to Katrina.
Really?
Absolutely. Now the
That's
media doesn't, I don't know, but the media doesn't pick up on that because the media follows a disaster for several weeks and then waits for the next one and follows that. But we continue to work. And part of that, and part of the reason for that is with working through our churches, they're there, and they're going to be there. They were there before the disaster, they're going to be there after the disaster, and so by helping and strengthening them to reach out to the community, the presence of Christ continues on in the community, and then we come in to support that structure to help them continually reach out to those who have been affected by the crisis or disaster.
That totally makes sense, because I could go down, but I'm going to leave. I might be going down for the day. The church is present all the time to aid the people.
And we're there to serve the church, which means many times we take the pastor of that church and tell him he's got to get out of town, and we put him up someplace in a hotel, him and his wife, for a weekend, so he doesn't burn out.
I could see somebody burning out from this situation.
Oh, you get what's called compassion fatigue, particularly with our church workers. When you're serving people who are in such desperate need, and you're giving and giving and giving, you run dry. And some would call it burnout, but it's compassion fatigue is what it is. It's just, you just need a breather away from it to kind of regroup. Jesus did the same thing, to regroup and then come back in and serve.
Well, I can see even getting post-traumatic stress disorder from long serves after a while.
Well, and we monitor that. We have people that are trained in debriefing and trained in helping people who are the workers in disaster to make sure that they don't go over the edge, because that's easy to have happen.
Well, with a chaotic situation like that, things I didn't even think of. A GPS. If you don't have a GPS and there's this disaster,
how do you find the address?
How do you find the address? And then, of course, bathrooms. Bring a trailer down. All of these things, and clothing,
and food,
water, of course, water, food, and so it's a very multi-layered, complex.
There's
situation.
A lot of work that goes in behind the scenes. And a lot of that takes place when there's not a disaster, so that you're ready to deploy when there is a disaster. And those are the things that we continually learn. How is the most effective way in going in, having food, having all of that. What do you do if there is no church, or the church has been too severely damaged to operate out of it? We have a portable office that we use out there, because we're not going to say, well, we're not going to serve because we don't have a church there. No, we serve. And there's always a church around. And we work through there. We've learned, we work with the other faith-based groups, and we always have contact with the local government there. I was down Saturday down in Washington and spent about an hour and a half with the mayor of the town and some of his staff, and listen to what some of the needs they have, and how ways we can work together and help them as they move through the disaster and rebuild from it.
Well, this one was in Schaumburg. Will you be coming back to Schaumburg
Well, we
soon
do them in
for our
various
viewers, if
we
they're
do them in
interested?
various locations. I think our next one scheduled is in Belvedere. And we have them all posted on the website when we do the trainings. So Schaumburg was one, 60-some or whatever got trained
That
there.
was a good turnout.
The Emmanuel Belvedere group will actually, at their pre-registration, is already greater than that. As of a couple of weeks ago, they already had 60 registered, so it would be another large group. But taking them through the training is the beginning. Train and stay trained, and then be ready to deploy.
Any resident can take advantage of this. You do not necessarily have to be attached to the Lutheran Church
correct.
To take this L.E.R.T.
We are Lutheran, and we don't hide that fact. And we are
it's
Christian,
in your title.
We are Christian-based, and but sometimes Christian-based ministries do not proclaim Christ in what they do. And the reason for that, to be very honest with you, is in order to receive FEMA dollars to help you do what you do in disaster, you cannot proclaim Christ. I mean, you cannot share that aspect of it. And I don't fight that. That's our federal law and separation of church and state. But we proclaim Christ, And so therefore we receive no state or federal funding, which can be big dollars. But we have made the choice that it's more important for us to tell people in whose name we do it, if they ask. So I mean, if somebody asks, why are you doing this? I say, well, because I'm a Christian. And that's what we do.
Well, now that we covered the L.E.R.T response training, and I did that segment on the comfort dogs, can you tell us what's new with the canine ministry?
Sad to say, there has been no lack of crises and disasters with shootings and fires, and try to get dogs as fast as we can. I had a little pep talk with our breeding dogs, to say, we need more puppies, guys. So,
well, you have your own training school now. That's new.
We have our own training school so that because we have a very high standard of how we train the dogs, so that when we deploy out, that the dogs are well behaved and standardized on what we do, and that we're labeled and certified and all of that. In fact, Harper College is one that we have worked with to establish a course, and that is going to be starting up. But it's all part of having a high standard in what you're
raising
doing.
the bar.
Well, we're Christians, and we shouldn't be sloppy. We should represent our best foot forward always, and that means knowing and having the respect for the people that we serve, so that we are bringing goodwill and not damage to people.
You are a wonderful asset to the communities, and I want to thank you for all your hard work.
Well, Tony, God works in spite of us.
And thank you for this interview.
Thank you, Tony.